Here at Motorboat and Yachting magazine, we love nothing better than getting out on the water and sea trialling a brand new model of boat. And between us over the past 12 months, me, Hugo Andre, Alan Harper and Phil Draper have sea trialled more than 100 new models. What follows then is what we deem to be the 10 very best new boats of 2025. We've come to Norway to take a sneak peek at a new prototype model from Nordkapp. Now, we've seen sports boats from Nordkapp at 8.3 metres before. We've seen the Noblesse Nordic day cruiser. We've also seen the coupe model, a pilot house equipped four-season boat. But this is the boat we're here to see. This is the new flagship of the Enduro line. And it's called the Nordkapp Enduro 830. That then is the new Nordkapp Enduro 830. Now, it is a prototype model, so there are a couple of tweaks to be made as yet, they tell me, but it's going to be launched in a couple of weeks, so it's very close to production caliber. Certainly it looks the part, it looks very distinctive. It's cleverly designed. Espen Thorup has done a beautiful job once again, and it's an absolute treat to drive out on the water, all of which makes this new Nordkapp Enduro 830 a very, very satisfying sports boat. We're in Sandvika today, just near Oslo, to take a look at a boat that caused more excitement amongst our viewers than pretty much any other boat we reported on at January's Düsseldorf boat show. It's called the Viknes 10. This is it. While we couldn't take it out in Germany, we've come here to Norway to give it the sea trial it deserves. But what we want to do, of course, is get underway, so we'll do that right now. As I say, this is a single diesel engine. We've got the top rated 440 here. You can go for the 370 instead, save yourself 200 kilos at about 6,000 euros. But pretty much everyone goes for this more powerful unit, which is apparently good for 28 rather than 25 knots. So we'll get a little bit up to pace. As we do so, we're doing 6 knots now. I've not had to touch the tabs at all yet. The bow is still nice and low, and if I look aft I can still see the horizon through that aft window. So running nice and flat, up to 8 knots now. It's interesting in terms of the directional stability as well. We got a little bit of a keel here on this boat, and it's semi-displacement, so the directional tracking is absolutely bang on. We'll just spin around a little, and that's quite pleasant too. It corners quite flat, maybe just a shade of heel into the turn, which is quite a reassuring trait. That's kind of what you want to see. And it grips nicely. There's no letting go at all. But we're coming alongside now after our brief transit to Oslo from Sandvika, and I've got to say I enjoyed that a lot. It's not a performance boat, of course, it was never going to be. It's a semi-displacement platform. It's big, it's bulbous, it weighs 8 tons, it's got a single inboard diesel, and even though we got the 440 horsepower unit, you know, 28 knots is not going to set your world alight, but it is very well behaved, it's very controllable. Ergonomically, it's very sound, and in terms of single-handed helming, it could hardly be less intimidating than this. All of which means that if you're tempted by the Viknes 10, by what it offers, by the price, which goes from 310,000 euros excluding VAT and comes with a very, very generous standard package, then there's absolutely no reason to hesitate. This Norwegian-built family cruiser is as hard-working and as high value as anything you're likely to see in this sector. One of the clear highlights of the recent Cannes Yachting Festival was undoubtedly the new flagship of the Pardo fleet. Now, that is a boat designed to take the elegant day boating credentials for which the established P-Series is justly renowned and mix those with the extra shelter, the extra four-season ability and the extra cruising credentials of the endurance boats. Now this is it, it's called the Pardo GT75 and we've come to Monaco 6 weeks after Cannes closed its doors to take this boat out on the water and see just how effective that hybrid approach has been. Now we've got a triple engine rig here. The standard units are a triple rig of Volvo Penta IPS 1050s. That's 3 D13 800s, but we've got the upgraded version here. We've got triple 1350s, so 3,000 horsepower in total. But as we move up onto the plane, it's not so much the grunt that leaves a mark, it's the fact that the transition is so extraordinarily flat. And that's a particularly welcome thing because it means that if I want to, I don't have to get up onto the plane to be comfortable. I can just ease her back before we get up there, just sit around about 11 knots. And at that pace, we're drinking a total of just 66 litres per hour, so 6 litres per nautical mile. Now something else I like is the fact that this is a very refined boat. You might not quite be getting that because we've got the aft doors open just to keep everyone comfortable on board. But the decibel readings are way down in the low to mid 60s for most of the cruising band, and that's just fantastic for a long passage. Now pushing on through, we're up on the plane now. Bet you didn't notice that transition either, did you? We're doing 20 knots. And that basically doubles our fuel flow in terms of our litres per nautical mile. So it's 12 litres per nautical mile, so we've got a range still at 20 knots of 275 miles. Again, pretty impressive that. And if we push on again, right through to 30 knots, and that increases to about 16 litres per nautical mile. And right through to the top end of about 34 knots, 16.5, 16.8. So our range reduces to about 200 nautical miles, but that's the lowest it gets. And that, as I say, is very impressive. This new GT75 then is going to be a really easy boat to like for all kinds of boaters. You've got those traditional Pardo outdoor day spaces, both at the bow and at the stern, plus, to a lesser degree, the sheltered space in that saloon up top. But you've also got some really voluminous and really flexible cruising accommodation. You can have the standard fit out with 3 cabins like this. You can have 4 cabins if you choose, but having seen the 2 cabin layout at the Cannes Yachting Festival with that lovely central lounge with the kitchen island operating as the hub of the lower deck, well, for me, if you can afford to do without the 3rd and 4th cabins, that makes all kinds of sense. However you choose to spec it, this is a really good boat for day boating, it's a really good boat for cruising, it's a really good boat to drive, and it's a really good boat to look at. All of which leads me to suggest that this new flagship of the fleet is actually one of the most broadly appealing and multi-talented platforms we've ever seen from Pardo. We're down in Plymouth today at Queen Anne's Battery to take a look at the new flagship of the Aquaspirit aluminium rib range, and it's a rib with some very major, very significant, very welcome differences. This is it. It's the new Aquaspirit 700. We've got the mid-range engine, as I say, that Suzuki DF250. So expecting a decent bit of performance out of it. Just activate the throttle, trim her in and get her up and underway. There's not much in the way of elements to combat here today. But as we get up and underway, there is a bit of bow lift, but you can power through that and flatten her straight off, just like that. Ease her back again, and we're planing at around about 15 knots, I'd say. You can increase that to around about 20 knots, and at that kind of space, you're actually doing about 1 litre per nautical mile. 20 knots, 20 litres, so we got a 300 litre fuel tank, as I mentioned. We save 20% redundancy in the system. That gives you a huge range of around about 240 nautical miles. Now we've pushed on again a little way through the rev range to around about 27 knots. And at that kind of pace, we're doing about 1.4 litres per nautical mile, which reduces the range to around about 170 miles. But even at the very top end of 42 knots, we're only looking at 2 litres per nautical mile. So this is certainly a very sustainable boat to run. We'll spin around to starboard. We're getting right on up towards the top end here. So she's nice and settled. Have to be careful with these big old swells though. She is after all quite a lightweight boat, as I say. Less than 3 metric tons, in spite of the fact that she's a 7-metre rib capable of seating 11 people. And the behaviour from the hull is very good. Quite a deep V we got here, around about 22 degrees at the transom, I think, and a relatively fine entry with reverse chines, just to give you that extra bit of lateral stability. Well, our brief time with the Aquaspirit 700 is now over. We're back at Queen Anne's Battery, but I have to say the equation for this boat is very straightforward indeed, because this is a really compelling package. As an aluminium boat, it's very tough, very resilient. It's also extremely novice friendly in the way it drives. It's very spacious indeed, particularly in the context of the sector, and it's actually great value for money too. The base package comes in at £89,995 plus VAT, including that Suzuki DF250. And in the context of the modern market, I think that represents really good value for money. There's a new entry point to the Beneteau Swift Trawler range, and not only is it bigger, cleverer and better looking than the boat it replaces, at €299,000 plus tax for the standard package, it's also more affordable, and this is it. This is the all-new Beneteau Swift Trawler 37. Before we jump on board, it's worth paying a bit of attention to the aesthetic on this new Swift Trawler 37, because as on previous models, it's the work of British designer Bill Dixon, but there are some critical changes here. So for a start, it's lower profile. Secondly, we've got a raised bow section, which creates a bit of extra volume, but also minimises the relative height of that superstructure further aft. And we also have a reverse screen, a one-piece reverse screen. So the overall impression of that is really quite striking. By the standards of the trawler market, it's a beautiful looking thing. First things first, I don't need to tell you that this is an impressive helm station. If you've been on a flybridge equipped cruiser at a relatively compact length, then you tend to be a little bit hemmed in spatially, particularly when you've got a raped screen. But because we've got this reverse screen a good way forward of the helm, everything is transformed. We've got the space up top for those skylights. They're optional, but they're included on this boat, so the through flow of air is lovely. And just look at the deckhead. I'm a 6-footer, I can barely even reach it. As you no doubt gathered by now, I really am a very big fan of this new Swift Trawler 37. As promised, it is bigger, it is cleverer, and it is prettier than the predecessor, that 35. And it's also cheaper in terms of the base package price. But there are a set of provisos you need to bear in mind. The first of them is that this test boat doesn't go for 315 grand plus tax. Spec'd up like this, it's going to cost you 517,000 plus tax, and that's 64% more than that base package price. So you need to bear that in mind. Secondly, it's a relatively substantial boat, but it only has the one double cabin. Thirdly, there's no wet bar and no option to spec one. And fourthly, there's no gyro and no option to spec one. And this is a Swift Trawler hull, relatively bulbous, relatively rounded. So if you're at anchor in a bit of a ripple, there's going to be a fair bit of movement. So you might want to consider the possibility of retrofitting one. But if you're okay with all of those compromises, all of those provisos, then this new 37 is an absolutely stellar bit of work from Beneteau. The Southampton Boat Show has now shut up shop for 2025, but one of the boats we've been particularly impressed with here is the new Ockelbo 25 cabin, the flagship of the Ockelbo fleet, a pilot house cruiser built entirely from aluminium in Latvia at the same factory that its parent company, Anytech, builds its boats. Well, the pontoons are all pretty empty, as you can see, but the Ockelbo 25 is sitting here patiently waiting for me. So let's jump on board and take a closer look at this quite extraordinary boat. So what I'm going to do is stop gassing, put my bolster down, trim her in, make sure that we got the tabs on manual, and we'll get her up and underway. See how quickly she planes. That there is 25 knots already, 30 knots. That's quite impressive. As I say, 300 horsepower on an 1800 kilo boat. That's lots of fun. You'll notice that there was very little in the way of bow lift there as well. I've trimmed her out a little if we just reduce the speed. We're doing 20 knots now. Nice and efficient. Still running pretty flat, and I can see just everything through those aft windows. We're not bow up at all. If we get her back up to speed a little bit, we'll just trim her in again a touch. And we'll swing around, and just as you get directional stability off the plane, well, look at that. When you're executing a rapid turn, it grips and it goes because that keel is doing its stuff. We got lots of hull in the water. Really reliable, really satisfying that. You can drive it a bit like a little go-kart. Same to port. We'll just get over a couple of these little bumps. We do have a couple of passengers further aft, so I don't want to upset everyone as I'm having my fun. There we go, we just heel her in, and you can power around. I could put a bit more power on actually. Lots of lovely grip, look at that. That's tremendous fun, that is. And as I say, we've got the 300 on the transom here. I did say that the maximum was 400, but apparently it's now 425. It's rated that high, so you can, they tell me, get around about 55 knots out of this boat, which is quite something. In terms of efficiency, well, with this 300 they're talking about 1.4 litres per nautical mile in cruising speed, 300 litre tank as standard. You can upgrade that if you like, but saving 20% in redundancy, that gives you around about 170 mile range, and that's perfectly acceptable for a boat of this nature. Well, we're just approaching Swanwick now, and I have to say this has been a tremendous amount of fun. Now, I know the UK market is fairly conservative in its outlook, so things like aluminium boats take a long time to gain the traction they deserve, but there's nothing speculative about this as a boat buying option. It is brought to us by a company, Anytech, with a very long, distinguished history in the creation of quality aluminium boats. It's also very well designed and very well put together, and if you spec it up with the right options, then it's an extremely capable multi-purpose family platform.
Welcome to Pylos in southern Greece, where we have got an exclusive opportunity to sea trial one of the most interesting yachts of recent years. This is the Arksen 85, a world-girdling super yacht built in the UK with the capability to go anywhere on the globe you wish to. My name is Hugo Andre, you're watching Motorboat Yachting. Let's go boating. For those of you who aren't yet familiar with the Arksen brand, they are all about adventure. And this boat in particular is built to explore anywhere in the world in almost any conditions. It has a huge range of over 7,000 miles. Theoretically, we'll find out if that lives up to the case when we do some performance figures. But it's also built to do that really efficiently and comfortably. Now, the build of the boat is aluminium. You can see it is, I think, about 40% recycled aluminium, but it is all welded. It is incredibly tough, no nonsense, simple to look after, So you'll notice that this is all just self-healing aluminium. It oxidizes slowly. That creates a kind of neutral surface. If you scratch it, it will oxidize again. There is very little maintenance to be done. It is also extremely tough. So below the waterline, it has 12 millimeter thick plate. Above the waterline, it's 8 millimeter. And then the superstructure, it's 6 millimeter. Well, here we are out on the foredeck. The breeze is now whipping over my shoulders, but still there's very little movement. And one of the advantages of having that very narrow section bow is that it just cuts straight through it with very little interruption from the waves. There's no sort of pronounced up and down movement because there isn't a great deal of buoyancy up front, so it's not constantly trying to lift every time it encounters a wave. It's also very noticeable that those chines deflect any water that does come up the hull. As soon as it comes up the chines, it just deflects off sideways and gets thrown out. So really, although we're obviously nowhere near a sort of full storm force, it's probably a force 4 at the most, but we have got a couple of feet of waves and it's as comfortable here as it is anywhere else on board the yacht. So I've just been doing a few figures, performance figures on this boat, and there's some really fascinating facts that have come out of it. Now, probably one of the most interesting is I've taken sound readings all the way through from idle speed at 750 RPM all the way through to the maximum of 1800 RPM. The difference, 1 decibel from idle speed through to maximum speed. That is unheard of. So at idle speed, it's 51 decibels, flat out, it's 53 decibels. But there is no change at all between 750 RPM and 1400 RPM. So at the main cruising speed, it's exactly the same noise, which is frankly virtually silent. When Arksen started designing this boat, they had 4 key characteristics in mind. They were capability, refinement, efficiency, and safety. And when we first looked around it, there were a lot of claims about how fuel efficient it was, how quiet it was, and how capable it was at sea. But until we've actually been out on it and proved it, those are only claims. But today, we've been out, and sure, the conditions weren't hugely challenging, but it has enabled us to prove a number of key things. First up, it really is as quiet as they say. Figures of around 51 to 52 decibels are absolutely minimal. In terms of comfort, there's no doubt about it. We were in 1.5 meter seas, maybe, but even so, it was so civilized. There's no hint of slamming. It's incredibly comfortable. There's just the bare minimum of pitching. And at least when you've got those stabilizers on, there's very limited roll. But also crucially, in terms of fuel efficiency, we have proved that it is capable of those very low numbers, around about 2 to 3 litres per nautical mile at a cruising speed of somewhere between 6 and 9 knots. Okay, not hugely rapid, but that is what this boat is designed for, and that does give you that immense cruising range of anywhere between 4,000 miles at 10 knots and 8,000 miles at kind of 6 or 7 knots. In terms of seakeeping, okay, we haven't proved particularly that it's capable of pushing its way through ice flows or dealing with force 8 winds, but the captain assures me he has been out in some really snotty weather and it has delivered everything they've said. So hats off to them. It does do all those things it claimed to do. Obviously, this is not a cheap boat. Starting price is around £8.5 million, and you do sacrifice a certain amount in terms of overall volume. It hasn't got that nth degree of luxury and finish. It isn't full of marble and polished stainless steel and mirror smooth surfaces. It is quite rough and ready. But if you want to, you can have the weld polished out, you can have it faired and painted and everything else. But that's not really the point of this boat. The point of this boat is to use it to go exploring and have minimal hassle looking after it and maximum capability and enjoyment. And for the owner of this boat, that is exactly what he's looking for. So you take your choices, you pay your money, you decide what kind of a boat you want. If you want a hardcore explorer yacht with world cruising capability, then this absolutely has that. 50 to 60 foot flybridge boats are one of the most hotly contested sectors of the market, particularly among the big three British manufacturers. So when Princess Yachts launches a brand new F58 and claims it sets new standards for space and sophistication, we wanted to get straight down and test it. So that is what we are going to do with a full tour and sea trial. So let's not waste any more time. My name is Hugo Andre, you're watching Motorboat and Yachting. Let's go boating. So let's see how it actually drives. I'm going to put both the throttles into sync and then start to pick up the speed a bit. Now this has electro-hydraulic steering and it's actually relatively heavy. I don't mind that. It gives a bit more of a feel. You're quite a big boat and it gives you a slightly more of a sense of the scale. But it does mean that when you switch it off, the wheel isn't necessarily straight. So you've got to straighten it up when you switch it off and then it will straighten up. So don't be put off by the fact that it doesn't look like it's straight. You can very easily resolve that. Let's pick the speed up a bit. Nice steady rise in the revs, nice and smooth. You can hear them a bit, but relatively speaking, it's quite quiet. So we're now doing 16 knots and 1700 RPM. Just need a little bit of tab perhaps to get the bow down. We've got a little bit of bow lift, but a very comfortable cruising speed. So if I take it up to 20 knots, let's see what it does. So 20 knots equates to about 1800 RPM, and at that speed I can see that we are burning 280 litres per hour, which is roughly 14 litres per nautical mile. And that will take the range down to around about 180, 190 nautical miles or so. And let's just see what it feels like to turn. We'll put in a port turn, make sure we've got space, we've got a boat on our port side, but let's do one lock, two locks. Nice bit of lean, not too extreme. Oh, I can see we've got the red jet coming, so I'm going to straighten up, stay out the way of that. As ever on a boat this size, it takes a little bit of time for the helm to react, but it feels nice and predictable. There's not much in the way of a chop at the moment, so we're not going to get a particularly good idea about how it's going to cope in the rough, but let's see how it'll do with a bit more pace on it. Let's pull the revs all the way up. It should rev to just under 2,400 RPM. Speed's building nicely. We've got a little bit of a ripple on the surface here, so we've got some idea. It feels to cut through it very nicely. We've got couple of notches down on the tabs. The speed is building nicely. We're doing 33 knots already. Still building a little bit. 34. So 34 knots, 2,360 RPM, and at this speed we are burning 470 litres an hour. This is exactly the kind of boat that Princess excel at, and true to their word, they've managed to deliver a boat that feels just that bit bigger and that much more luxurious than you'd expect of a 58-foot boat. Now, it's not cheap prices for this. Once you've kitted it out with all the extras that you're likely to want, it's going to be around £2.5 million or $3 million US. But in terms of what people want from their boat, it's got it all. It's got performance of up to around 35 knots, it's got refinement, it's got a decent range, and it's got plenty of features. Sure, perhaps they could have tried a little bit harder with the beach club area. There aren't any clever folding platforms, but in our experience, that's not really what Princess customers want. They want something that delivers, and the F58 certainly does that. This is the new Navan S30. Now, if you haven't heard of the Navan name before, that is because they are a new brand and they were created by the Brunswick Group, one of the world's largest marine corporations who own, amongst other things, Bayliner, Sea Ray, Boston Whaler and Mercury engines. So you won't be surprised to see that this is powered by a pair of Mercury outboards. Now, the reason that they created this brand is that they probably didn't escape their notice that adventure boats, those sort of walk-around style boats from Axopar and Saxtor and the like, have had a lot of success. Now, they were, relatively speaking, a little bit late to the party, but the advantage of being late to the party is that you can see what others have done, learn from everything that they've created and try to go one better. And I have to say that at first sight, this looks very promising indeed. Now, so far, they have only created one hull. It is a 33-foot hull, but they have created two versions of the boat. There is this open one, the Navan S30, with prices starting from about £134,000 ex VAT, and then there is a fully enclosed C30 wheelhouse model. Now, you can see a full tour of that on my previous video, but we are going to concentrate on this, the open boat, because this is the first chance we've had to do a full sea trial. My name is Hugo Andre, you're watching Motorboat and Yachting. Let's go boating. One of the things to know about the Navan hull is that it is a twin step hull. And what I mean by that is it's got these two steps halfway down the hull which draw air in at the side, and that creates like a little curtain of bubbles under the hull, which should make it run more efficiently and a little bit quicker. The other thing it does is that it tends to ride a little bit flatter than most hulls. Now, the only downside of steps is that sometimes if you go into a corner too hard and too fast, particularly with the engines raised, it can slip a bit. So it'll be interesting to see how it performs. We've got a decent bit of chop. There's a nice breeze. We're running with it at the moment. Let's see how it goes. Oh, there's a lot of thrust from those twin V8 engines. Straight away, we're up to 20 knots. Now we're at 26. 30. Let's go all the way, see what kind of speed we get. Oh my goodness. 36. 40. Whoa. 50 knots, absolutely creaming over the waves. 51, 52. Wow. I'm just going to slow down a little bit for the camera as much as anything else. But that is really strong performance, and just as I hoped, it runs very nice and flat. Now, in terms of efficiency, we're still doing 30 knots, just goes to show how powerful those engines are. But at 3,500 RPM, doing 30 knots and burning just over 60 litres an hour, which, given the performance on tap, is not too bad. I've done the sums, and from the 400 litre fuel tank, that should give a range of about 150 miles. But there is so much in reserve. Just look how quickly it picks up from 30 knots. Whoa! Straight away. 35, 40, 45, 50. That's just how quick it is. Really impressive and feels good and solid. And that lovely flat ride means that the bow is nice and deeply immersed, cuts through the chop that we've got here. Let's see how it performs in a turn. We'll try, well, we're still doing 40 knots, so let's see if it can take a hard turn at this speed. Okay. So that does just go to show, if you turn really quickly, at sort of 40 plus knots, you do start to get a little bit of a slip. And that probably is just because the hull is ventilating a little bit. It was nothing too scary, it didn't flip completely, but because of the chop and that lift, you do get a little bit of slip. Let's try at slightly slower speed. So there we go. Really interesting boat to drive. It feels so quick, so composed. It's got a lovely ride, particularly on this kind of Solent chop where we've probably got waves of probably 2, maybe sort of 2.5 foot at most. But the hull works beautifully in that. It feels very composed, cuts very cleanly through it, and that huge range of cruising speeds, it just gives such immense confidence. So the only thing you need to be a little bit careful of is to not turn too quickly, too fast, particularly when you've got the engines trimmed up. But in any kind of normal behavior, I'm going to extremes because I'm a tester. It's what we do. We try and push it beyond the limit. But as a cruising boat or a water sports boat and a really all-round entertaining boat, it's got a massive range of versatility and feels so solid and so well honed. Really impressed by the way this boat drives. When I first started this test, I was wondering whether there was space for yet another of these adventure boats. There are so many different brands doing this kind of thing. But you know what? Having driven it and had a good play with it, I think there definitely is. Now, admittedly, there are quite a lot of options fitted to this boat, and it's those options that really help it stand out from the crowd. All up, this particular boat comes to £250,000, including VAT. But having driven it, now I know what the hull is capable of, how much performance those 2 big engines deliver, and all the lovely little touches. It really does feel like something quite special. If you're looking for a boat with serious performance and some top quality fit and finishing, this might be the one.
When the Hansa Group acquired Fjord Yachts back in 2006, one of the first jobs it put its mind to was the creation of a proper, dedicated, premium day boat, and it was called the Fjord 40 Open. It came with an elegant plumb bow, wide open decks, configurable furniture, so there are plenty of places to sit, to dine, to sunbathe, and it's been a really effective formula for Fjord over the years, so much so that it's been copied by various other manufacturers. But according to Fjord, the way people like to go day boating has slightly evolved during that time. They don't just want to enjoy themselves during the day, they want to have somewhere to sleep or maybe even to weekend. And this all new Fjord 39XL is their answer to exactly that conundrum. We'll go to starboard first, just heel her over, and you'll see we're looking right down at the water there. Now I can trim in and I can cut hard, or I can put on some more throttle. I can just ease the legs up a touch more, dial in a bit of slip, and you see how easy this is, really novice friendly. And of course we can do the same to port. We're just going to nip over our own weights here before we do that. There we are, and we're doing 37 knots. Over to port we go, and we can just add a little bit of trim, power around this, endless reserves of grunt, loads of grip from those 440s. Really enjoyable way to drive a boat that. You never feel like you're losing momentum or losing shape. So in spite of its appearance as a very kind of sunny weather, sophisticated premium med day boat, it is a bit of a performance machine, I have to say. Well, we're back alongside now, and I have to say that was really a tremendous amount of fun from a helming perspective, and that's not something you might necessarily expect from a boat that looks as elegant as this, but it really is. It's very soft riding, it's very novice friendly, there's plenty of power, plenty of controllability, so it's great fun from the helm. But of course the key issue with this day boat, this new day boat from the day boat specialist Fjord, is whether or not it makes sense to sacrifice that excellent bow lounge we saw on the 38 and replace it with the extra volume of the cabin. Now, for my money, I'm not convinced that day boaters really do want that. But if Fjord is right, and that's the kind of thing they're after, then this new Fjord 39XL is a superb way to achieve it. Well, I think you'll agree there are some fantastic boats amongst those 10, but for me, the 3 best have to be the supremely capable Nordkapp Enduro 830, the brilliant value Viknes 10, and the absolute showstopper that is the new flagship Pardo GT75. If you think differently, please do let us know in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this in the future, then make sure you subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.